Kirsten Panachyda, and I have a son who has bipolar disorder. He got sick when he was about 14, and just really changed our life in every way, changed my life. I had to set aside my big 5-year plan and do something entirely different.
Mm-hmm. I'm Erica Searles, and I am a mother of 6 and a foster mother, and I am a David's Refuge host and mentee for single moms.
Oh, and I just joined the David's Refuge caring team. Yeah, forgot to say that.
We met homeschooling.
Yes.
Did we not? I
Yes.
think so. Yeah, homeschooling many, many years ago. Raised our oldest kids together and homeschooled in groups. Kirsten is a phenomenal teacher, and she taught my children to do history and literature and English, and they, to this day, credit her more with their education than mine, than me. She's phenomenal with kids and with educating. That's how we met.
I loved your kids. Yeah, our kids were little when you and I first met. I think I might have had a kindergartner, so I was just starting, and but we kind of clicked because we were a little bit outliers,
Yes.
even in the even in the homeschool community, and so we could always count on each other to maybe be a little snarky, maybe be a little outside the box.
Yes.
So it was good. And so then when we started going through life, we were already bonded, kind of in that way. So.
Yep.
Well, I will say this. When Nicholas first started showing symptoms and being in crisis, I had no fear that you would judge me in any way, or that you would be anything except really compassionate and caring. And I already knew that you loved him and you loved me, and it was totally okay to tell you all the ugly parts. And that's hugely valuable. I mean, that's beyond anything for a friendship, and I appreciated that so much.
Well, thank you. That being seen in that way that's it, and that's my goal as a host and mentee, is to see my moms. So you got me choked up. That's beautiful. And Kirsten, for me, when one of my, you alluded to the things that happened. So we've got our little lives with our happy little families and children, and then the things start to happen.
Yeah.
And when we adopted Viv, a very sickly little baby who needed us, she was not adopted yet. She was a foster and came to live with us, and was nursing her to health, and disappeared, as we do when we're faced with these things. And all of our time and energy are taken up by these children, as it needs to be. And you hosted a baby shower for me for this child that I did not even know we would be able to keep. So she was my be-all and end-all, and you stepped up and had a baby shower at your home for me. And that was the validity that you gave my parenting for her, even when she was not mine yet, was just life-giving. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. I can't believe that's still like,
It's
after
there.
all these years,
Yeah,
it stands out.
It stands out, yeah.
Yeah.
Tissues. Oh, so thank you. That's our friendship.
I was the diaper genie. I don't know if you knew that, if you ever found that out.
No.
All these years later, I'll tell you, the person who was putting diapers in your car at Cole.
Oh, thank you.
You left a note on the door one time. You're like, whoever's doing this.
Oh, I don't remember that either. Thank you.
That was super fun for me. It really was. It was, after, everything that I'd gone through with Nicholas, and this was before the bipolar disorder, but with the seizure disorder, and having been on bed rest with him and all that, and you walked me through that, and it was so fun to be able to see someone else who was carrying a weight and feel like, oh, maybe I can do something that will, help you feel just loved, just seen and loved. So.
When you did. And I think more people I hope more people are able to find that joy in that, just that in serving other people, even in our trauma and what we're going through, being able to serve others is just, given the opportunity to serve is just life-giving. It's a beautiful thing. And it doesn't have to be big. It can be just a small thing. So.
Well, you told me earlier that being given the opportunity to be a friend to someone was really important to you. So, you said when I disappeared, because I'm having crisis with one of my children, it's still so important that our friends give us a call and say, oh, I'm really going through it with my kid, or, my husband is struggling and, he can't find a job, and it's important to let us share your burdens too, because we want to be a friend. It's life-giving to us too. So it's been hard for me over the years to see on Facebook or like a big celebration at church for kids who are graduating, kids who are going off to college. Those are, for me, our crisis really came when my son was a teen. So those are the things that I really remember. And there were years that I, left the church service to go cry in the parking lot because I wasn't sure that my son was going to survive to graduate high school, and it was very painful for me. But on the other hand, I don't want to not get people's, celebrate with us or come to our kid's graduation party. I don't want to be left out of those things, because I want to celebrate that with my friends. I want to let the better angels of my nature, take over. Even if there's a pain component, I want to be able to celebrate that with them. But I think, I don't know, for me, I really have to be gentle with myself. I feel like I have to really acknowledge that there's a grief, an ambiguous grief that's happening, because it's not over something that has happened, but over something that I fear that I might, an expectation I fear I might lose out on. So it's very complicated. And I think that sitting with that for a while is key to be able to then come with fresh eyes and a truly joyful heart to other people's celebrations.
I agree that it's incredibly complicated, and I play this game. It's not the right word. I play it very carefully, and I am not a big Facebook poster, or I don't post those milestones for my typical children as much because of my sensitivity to my moms and other people, my David's Refuge moms and other people in the community, having been on both sides. But it's just so complicated. I think that we do have, we need to feel it. We need to feel the mourning. We need to go to the car and cry. And if I had been in your church when you left to go to the car to cry, I would have helped myself out and joined you. And I think that might be the piece that's missing. I think that mourning together, say my child's picture was on that screen. There, there's that graduation celebration. I can still mourn yours while you celebrate mine. And I think that balance needs to be struck. That's why it's so complicated. There's no answer. It's not going to happen sitting in these chairs. There's no, it's just far too complicated. But if we can all be a little bit more aware of the other's emotion, then we can have things where, we do get to be a friend to someone, even though we're in the midst of it. There's no good answer other than actually showing compassion on both sides.
That's key. If someone, that would have made a big difference to me, if someone would have seen and shared that with me, just to see it. And I think, I think people want to. I think people want to support caregivers and support parents that, are maybe grieving those milestones that might never happen or might happen in atypical ways, but they don't, maybe they're afraid to step into that space with that parent. Maybe they feel like it's too private, or my child was up on the screen, and so my presence with you will just make you feel worse, and those things are just not true.
Right.
That it would be great if people would recognize that we want to celebrate with you. We don't want you not to have this moment. We want you to have that moment.
And we may have that moment with another child in our family.
Right.
It's all okay.
Yeah.
I also think that, so say someone had followed you to your car and spent that time with you, and you lashed out. That's okay. Right. It's okay. It's okay to be the person coming to your aid, to coming to join you and to share that space with you. Did nothing wrong by being with you, and you do nothing wrong by lashing out or crying or saying words that might not be very nice about why isn't this, my thing. So it's all normal, and I think people need to just not be afraid of normal.
Yeah. Even if it, looks
uncomfortable.
Uncomfortable.
It looks ugly.
It's
definitely.
not Instagrammable,
It can
for
look
sure.
very ugly.
Yeah.
It can look very ugly.
Yeah.
Support system is something I have not been good at accepting. I have a serious chronic illness, and during my diagnostic process and my years of not knowing what was wrong with me, I definitely pushed people away. I kept everyone at arm's length. I thought, I'll be better soon, and then I will be enjoyable to be around, and then people will want to be with me. So let me just get better, let me deal with my thing, and as soon as the doctors fix me, I'll be fine. And then we can go out to dinner or have fun, or you can come over for coffee. But I did it long enough that I kind of people were like, okay, we're just gonna let her have her space. It's incredibly detrimental. And I learned a lot. I gained a lot of compassion for my my David's Refuge moms and this community. But I definitely think allowing that back in, you've stayed in touch. A few people have stayed in touch, and using that, calling you for a ride somewhere, or reaching out when I'm especially depressed or over my illness is definitely beneficial, and having that community is vital. I strive to be a community to others now, and it's definitely boosted me back up and fed my soul now that I have caught on. I learned a lot through this chronic illness, and I've always been baffled when people say it, but I wouldn't change it for anything because of the way it changed me, and it gave me this position at David's Refuge. It has enabled me to deal with my foster moms when I send, when they're reunified, my children are reunified with their moms. So yeah, community is vital, and I went far too long without it, and I'm very glad to have some of it back. It's a good thing.
Talk about what your mom told you.
Oh, my mother is amazing. So my mother said to me, as I was pushing everyone away from me and not allowing people to bring meals or to help take care of me or to take care of the kids even, I was like, no, they'll be fine. My mom said, do not deny other people their blessing. So by me telling a friend, no, don't bring dinner, they then did not have an opportunity to be blessed by serving, which is what I talk about now all the time. I love, serving is just, it always has been, but serving is the be all and end all to me. And I was denying people that. What? Where do I get off doing it? No, you can't.
It's almost like it was a blow to your identity.
Which was the server.
Right.
So
Right. But,
so accepting it is huge.
Being able to accept it, you discover a wider community of support for yourself.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I think about the times that that people reached out with a kindness, when we were really in the midst of the crisis years with our son. I was at a hotel to be near him where he was being hospitalized at one point, and there was a person who was serving in the breakfast room. And she came and, she just chatted with me, and I told her, why I was there for these weeks, and she prayed with me. And then I was still there. He was there over the Easter weekend. And I was just heartbroken because, I didn't want him to be in the hospital. I didn't want him to be, so sick that he needed that care. I wanted to be home with our family on Easter and with my church, but really I wanted my family from how it was before.
Right.
That was really what I was grieving. And I was just in a really bad space. And she came in on Easter Sunday, which was a day off for her, so that she could put flowers on the table where I ate breakfast. And she was like a stand-in for my community while I was,
Right.
away doing this thing. And it meant everything to me. It meant that, that God loved me. It meant that people saw me and cared about that. And just things like, oh, we're heading to the ER. I
Right.
happen to have a text thread with all the people that I know will pray for us. And so I can quick send that
Right.
text. And yeah, I didn't have to explain a lot.
Right.
So having people that understood or that already knew the story, it gave me so much. It didn't take away the hardness of it, but it was almost like this weight got lifted just a little, like someone had put their shoulder under the burden for me, just a little, just enough. But even practical things, you talk about someone bringing you a meal, or I don't know. I feel like with a long-term situation with a child, that can sort of get lost.
Yes.
A little bit.
And yeah, my disease too.
Yeah.
It didn't, as I said, I'm like, oh, I'll be better in 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And then the
Yeah.
next thing happened, I'll be better in 6 weeks. And then it goes on so long, and I'm like, ooh, I probably shouldn't have pushed those people away. And it gets tiring.
Yeah.
People don't, it's tiring.
Yeah,
And you
it's
don't
been
get
a
the meal
year,
after.
it's
Yeah,
been 5 years,
right.
it's been,
Exactly.
but meanwhile, it's not like the crisis is abating, you're just
Right.
getting more tired.
Yes.
So that is something that I would wish for people who want to serve
Right.
caregivers. That's something that I wish that they would understand, is that even though they've settled into a new normal, it doesn't mean that they don't still need,
Right.
those moments where someone comes and puts flowers on their table.
Yeah.
They really do.
Yep.
I have, when it comes to hospitalizations for my child, I have a little bit different experience than some caregivers do, because my child has, what's deemed a mental illness. So we go to different emergency departments, or sometimes we do. The pediatric psychiatric emergency department, it wasn't a great experience for us. I think that is slowly changing. I think that people are starting to recognize that. But it was very difficult the first couple times we went to a dedicated psychiatric emergency department. And it didn't feel caring, like a caring place to us. There was no acknowledgement of the parents or of the family unit or whatever. The last time that we went to an emergency department with our son, we went to the regular hospital, the pediatric hospital, and it was like being upgraded to first class. It was very different. There was like a lounge with coffee in it. There was a place where I could take a shower. I could spend the night in my son's room if I wanted to. It was very different. And on the one hand, I felt a little bit like, maybe like we snuck in here. This is we snuck in. But after a while, I started to think, this is how it should be, even for psychiatric patients. This is, my child is in crisis, and we're scared, and we don't know what's going on, and, we need to not sit in hard plastic chairs overnight with our child. And so, so that was our experience. I think that is changing. I think that people are recognizing more the needs of caregivers whose children have what's deemed a psychiatric illness. And I hope that's true. I advocate for that, because those little touches really make a difference. When a nurse comes in, having them talk to you and ask how you're doing. Just those little things. It was like night and day for us.
Yeah, I think having that point person, if we're talking about a hospital setting, having that point person to come and, I think the theme here is seeing you, to see you if a nurse has the time, which we know in our system right now, there's not much time.
They're so overworked.
But if they do have the time, if they're allotted that time to see you and give you just a few moments. One of my fosters, who is autistic and was with us for 8 months, was a flight risk at 2 years old, would climb out windows and leave the house. We had to have locks and alarms on all of the doors and windows, and there was no concern. No, he was a foster child, and no one wanted to hear about him. So it was a very, very difficult time. I was completely isolated for 8 months. Did not leave my house. I left my house twice. I went to Wegmans once, and I went to a thrift store once to buy him a toy, and those were the last 2 times I left my house in 8 months. Even outside, I couldn't take him outside. And no matter what I did to bring this up to medical professionals, it was just blown off. I think it was just he was looked at as a lost cause, and there's nothing they could do for him. So not being seen is a big deal. I think being seen as someone who knows what you're doing and can advocate for your child and being listened to is vital. I haven't seen that changing as a chronic illness patient, but I look forward to it someday. And I think that those point people are really the only answer. I think I'm a trained end-of-life doula, and having someone like that in all positions in healthcare would be fabulous. So, someone who can just navigate with you.
Well, and that's so important, because, we had no idea what we were doing when this first, this was totally unexpected for our family. And, the first time especially that we went to bring him to the emergency department, we didn't know what to expect. We didn't know what to bring. We had no advice. So I think, in terms of community support, if you knew that there was someone that you could call and say, I'm bringing my child to the emergency department, what do I and don't I pack? Or to be able to go on a website and have a list and know where that resource is. You can't pack shoes with laces, for example, or pens, or there are certain things that you can't bring to a psychiatric ED. And we didn't know that. We didn't know we were going to have to go through metal detectors.
Right, and so much more trauma when they take you in and remove your shoes.
So it's just, so those practical things. But again, it comes down to, is there someone or somewhere that I know about that I could call or ask? And then, for us, now that we've been down the path a little bit, to let people know our story so that they can call us and say, hey, we think we're headed in that direction. What do I need to know? Because they don't know what they don't know. It's so important.
I'm working with a family in Virginia right now whose son is terminally ill, and the mom, it's far away, but she texts me 7, 8, 10 times a day and just asks those little questions and do things like print up a urine output sheet for her to keep track, because she has absolutely no medical background whatsoever, doesn't understand how to deal with the hospice that she's dealing with, and just having that little shoulder, that little bit of support she reports back to me that it's very helpful. So the
hardest time one of the hardest times. The one that really stands out for me was, I would say it was about 3 years into Nicholas being really sick. We call those that time the crisis years, because he was hospitalized, and there was a lot of self-harm and suicidality, and it was just relentless. It was a long time before we were able to help him be stabilized, and it just wore me down, just wore me down physically, because there was this hypervigilance. I was always on the watch for him, and I know other parents can really relate to that. Just always on the watch. There was always another appointment or another therapy or another thing, and meanwhile, we were trying to help him at least sort of do life also, and it was just so taxing. It was physically taxing. The stress really got to me during that time. My hair was falling out, and I got shingles, and I blacked out and bashed up my face one time. I was just falling apart at the seams, and I had insomnia, which is like for me a typical stress response, and I would go downstairs in the middle of the night because I couldn't sleep, and I would just feel like crying, like it was just building up in me, and I was trying not to wake up my husband. If he could get a good night's sleep, good. So I would go downstairs and like try to make myself a cup of tea or something, whatever. And then this one night, they were considering whether they were going to have to put my son in long-term residential treatment for like a year or more, and I just felt like such a failure, because I had just poured myself into parenting even before he got sick, but then like parenting times 100 after he did. It was everything. I gave my best, and then stuff I didn't even know I had in me, and it still wasn't enough. It still hadn't worked. It wasn't enough for him, and so I went downstairs this one night, and I got my red tea kettle, which is all, it's like battered and probably spattered with grease, because it's always on my on my stovetop, and I don't clean as much as you do. And that's as far as I could make it, and I just sat down on my kitchen floor, and which also wasn't that clean. Frankly, it wasn't.
I'll be over.
Okay. And I just was crying, and I was like, my whole life is a waste. It's just been a big waste, and the best that I could give wasn't enough, and he might die anyway, in which case, what was all this for? And I really just had this, these. I look at it now, and it's not reality, and it's not the truth that God speaks to my heart now, but it felt so real that I had just wasted my life to no purpose, and that I just couldn't do it anymore. I just was depleted entirely, and that was the hardest night for me. And I eventually crawled back into bed, and the next morning I called my doctor, and I said, I need help. This has gone beyond, I need to, go get a massage or something. I need real help. I need a therapist, and I probably need medication, and it took a while. It wasn't instant, but it took a long time to reach some kind of emotional and physical and spiritual wellness again after that, and a lot of that was reaching out for help, and a lot of that was just sitting with God and letting myself just recognize all that grief, and feeling that, and trying to realize that, life is it's just hard. It's just hard, and that's okay. And I don't need to be Superwoman, and I can't, and that's okay too. But that was really a low point for me. That was the worst.
Yeah. So my worst moment was when my foster baby, Dominic, we had him for 8 months, and he was being returned. I adore the foster system. We've had several wonderful experiences, but this little guy went home to a home that was not safe for him. I believe firmly in reunification, and it's the way it should be. But this was not the best situation. And when he arrived, he was nonverbal, violent beyond measure. We were his third foster home. They had not told us that. We were his third foster home in 3 months because he could not stay at any of the places he was. And when I found that out after a couple of months, even though he was incredibly violent and truly damaging to my children, they were older and they were not unsafe, but it was a very bad situation. I refused to return him and have him go to another foster home. And at the same time, I was being diagnosed with my third illness, and it was the most traumatic time in my entire family's life. But when he left, it's what you're talking about, the feeling like a failure. The loss of him was agonizing. But the pain of feeling as though I had failed somehow and letting him go, which I didn't have a choice in. Again, the reality. I know the reality is he was returning to his mother. And that was the foster system, not me. So I did not surrender him. I gave him back to his mother. But that feeling like I had failed him, and not, he went from speaking 3 words to 21 before he left us, which was wonderful. But it was heartbreaking. My health declined so dramatically, so rapidly in that 8 months because of the stress of being stuck in my home. You've been there, being stuck in my home with him 24 hours a day and worrying that staying awake at night, worrying he was going to escape the house somehow. And there's no happy ending to that. I kind of sense that with you too. While Nicholas is doing beautifully now, there's no that time. There's no light. There's no, hey, oh, it all worked out great. Right. Life is hard. That is the end of it, and the end of that particular thing, and that's okay also. Like we need to normalize that those situations they affect you, and you can recover from them. But those are some big feelings, and I will never forget him and what happened during that time. It's burned into my head. Have a little PTSD when it comes to windows and door locks, and we had some pretty traumatic experiences while he was there. I think about him every day, as do my older children ask me all the time about him. He's a huge part of our life, but it was a truly devastating and traumatic time period in our family, and not one that has a glowing, shining light at the end of the tunnel.
I think it's important what you just said about trauma, because I started to get some information on this. I attended a conference on mental health, and one of the breakout sessions was about the trauma that is experienced by parents when their child is in crisis. And this was specifically about mental health, but they did address kids with special needs and so forth. And I think that is something that we don't recognize enough in ourselves, that going through a crisis with a child that you love actually can trigger a trauma response in the parent too. Having seen injuries on my son gave me a trauma response, which then I really needed to deal with in order to be healthy. And that is actually way more common and typical for parents than I think we realize. And we're all about pouring out and giving, and of course it's about the wellness of the child, but each parent, each parent has a precious soul also that deserves to be taken care of and seen and loved, and to have compassion and therapy if we need it. You know, it's important. You know, each individual is so precious to God, and to recognize that just because, well, it wasn't me that had this special need, it wasn't me who, you know, struggled with suicidal ideation, it wasn't me who had, you know, this very difficult traumatic childhood that caused these behaviors in me, it wasn't me, but experiencing that with someone that you love is a level of trauma too, literally.
Yeah.
So, being a caregiver for my son, it changed everything for me. I mean, I had a vision of how my life was supposed to go, and I had a vision of how life with a big L was supposed to work. And I would never have admitted this to other people, but I really believed that if I did ABC, that I was owed D. You know, and the cheerleader, you know, we were homeschoolers, the cheerleaders in the homeschooling movement would tell us, you know, if you really, you know, commit yourself to this, and then, you know, then you're going to have teenagers that don't have these issues. And, you know, it was a big lie. It was. But, and it's not just the homeschool community. I think that parents in general, that a lot of times we are fed this idea that it's supposed to go a certain way. And if it didn't go that way, then it's an aberration that needs to be fixed. So for me, being a caregiver for my son, one thing that I learned was that there is value and honor in that life. That just spending this day loving my child and doing whatever it is he needed that day from me, that there is so much value in that. Whether or not it works, whether or not he eventually gets well, whether or not he hates me later, that time spent pouring myself out for him is worthwhile. And I can have peace in that my purpose in life is not, you know, wasted, that there really is value in just loving this person. And I think for me that was the biggest change. That was a huge mind shift, that I didn't have to accomplish great things. My child didn't have to reflect me in a positive way. You know, I didn't need to. That for me, success was not faithfulness. Success is faithfulness. Success is not outcomes. And that has been like a complete paradigm shift for me.
But you also used it for such good in your writing and teaching. So you allowed it, the change, you allowed that to be used for good, and worked very, very hard at it being used for good. And I think, so with me, I've been caring. I have, my bio children are all typical children, but two have very severe food allergies. So from the time they were tiny, I've been taking care of their food allergies, making sure that they were safe. So the wearing down of me started from the time I was a mom, 30 years ago. Started, very, very early, and then continued, and then the things started to happen, and the foster care happened, and Vivi happened. We've got our beautiful little youngest child. So all of those, and then after Vivi came Dominic, who was my very atypical child, my amazing little boy. And I think the changing that happened, it can't be pinpointed. It was the changing that happened in me is not that I came to some realization about, like you did, your realization's fabulous. Mine was, I have to do something with this. I have this knowledge now. I have this, this experience with my children's, allergies and severe learning disabilities, and 2 of them. And then my experience with the foster system and Dominic and our adoption of a baby who was born addicted, just kind of gave me, it changed me in that I knew I had to do more. I had to become active in the community, and even if it was just with friends and saying, hey, I see you. And then David's Refuge came along and was a catalyst and an outlet for that. But yeah, I don't think the change was so gradual in my personality and my, what I was able to accomplish, and my stamina in being able to go through, like what you've gone through, and being able to go through it. But I think mostly it was that the change was coming out of my very strong shell, emerging from, my cocoon and my shell, and realizing that, I've got to put myself out there, which was not easy. So it was a big change.
Yeah.
Very big change, but a little more gradual. I would tell a mother or a father, or older siblings even, who are not practicing self-care, to be very careful, because it can make you very unwell. And we need to care for ourselves so that we're able to continue the work we have ahead of us, and hope for the future. And if you're not well and don't take care of yourself, you can't really move on with your future.
Yeah.
And there's a future. We don't know what it looks like, but there's one there, and there are jobs to be done, and self-care is vital, absolutely vital. I tell my David's Refuge moms all the time to take rest and care for themselves, and even if that's just reaching out. Maybe you can't do, silly things like a pedicure or a massage, like you mentioned, but reaching out to somebody, texting somebody, that's self-care. Like I said, breaking through that shell I had, was reaching out and saying, because you're saying, I matter, please, please, I'm here, I need help, and that is so hard to do sometimes. So even if it's just texting someone and saying, think about me, give me some advice, help me, that's self-care also. I think people too often think that self-care is the biggie, like going for lunch, going for a pedicure,
Right,
and then they
right.
shut down. Like, I can't do that, which is true. You can't do that. But you can break your shell down and reach out to someone, and ask for a little help.
Yeah. But I think what you said is so profound. You said it's signaling to yourself, I matter.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that's really the thing. I mean, you have to examine, do I really believe that every person, every individual on this planet has worth and matters? And if that's true, then it's true about you too.
Mm-hmm.
And are you going to apply that belief to your own self?
Yeah, and we're the first people, I think, the parents of these children who would say every life matters.
Right.
But yeah, you're exactly right.
Yeah.
Reflecting that back to ourselves is not.
I mean, this is something that I talk about all the time with moms that I mentor, that you also have a precious soul.
Mm-hmm.
You also. I will give you advice that I can give you from my perspective as another mom about, what might or might not work with your child. But I'm not a mental health professional, but something I can tell you is that you have a precious soul, and you deserve to take care of it, and God wants you to.
Mm-hmm.
We are loved by God, and that matters. We all, each caregiver matters just as much as our children do.
Yeah.